public school campus. This one is all the more detail about the laws, which, for instance, on page 53, it explains that students have the right to be exempt from any class that is teaching something contrary to their religion. Now think what that means. If your kids are going to the public school and you don't want them taught evolution, all you need to do is go down to the school, to the principal, or to the teacher and say, and I would do it in writing, and you might want to send it certified mail, so you got proof they got a copy. Spell it out clearly. I do not want my child taught evolution. This is contrary to our religion. I do not want my students taught sex education. This is contrary to my religion, or whatever it is you don't want them taught. The school then has to give them alternative material, and they cannot count their grade off. If they do, you have grounds for a lawsuit. This is how the atheists are getting all their goals accomplished. They're suing for the dumbest things, you know. I'm not saying we ought to be sue happy, but we ought to stand up for our rights. Remember when in Acts chapter 16, when Peter was beaten, they threw him in the jail, he got the Philippian jailer saved. At the end of the story, the leaders in the town said, okay, go tell those guys they can leave now. Paul said, that wasn't Peter, it was Paul. Paul said, forget it. They beat us openly, uncondemned, being Romans. You tell them to come down and apologize publicly. Right? We need some of the motsy that Paul had to say, let's just, hey, forget it. I'm not going to roll over and let you beat me. I want a public apology. And I think it's time that Christians, in Christian love and with wisdom from the Lord, we need to use the legal system. They were tying Paul up, going to beat him one time, and he said, hey, I'm a Roman citizen. I appeal to Caesar. Scared them all half to death, didn't it? What's wrong with that? Okay? Let's stand up for what's right. And students need to know they do have the right to be exempt from classes that are teaching something contrary to their religion. In Matthew chapter 18, Jesus said, whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone be hanged about his neck. Any teacher that's teaching kids evolution, obviously that's going to destroy their faith in the Bible. And anyone that destroys a child's faith better carefully read what Jesus said. You'd be better off drowned in the depth of the sea. I would hate to stand before God and say, God, I was a teacher in the school and I ruined the faith of the kids that came through my class. But that's what's going to happen Judgment Day, folks, to many people. That's going to be a fearful thing to fall into the hands of an angry God. And I think we need to warn the teachers that are teaching evolution that they're going to face God's judgment someday for this. They're not the enemy. The devil is the enemy. Shortly after this trial, the world's most famous court trial in Dayton, Tennessee, the atheists realized they didn't get any publicity like they wanted. So some different groups started making movies or plays. They traveled around the country putting on a play called Inherit the Wind. Has anybody ever heard of that one? That'll be a quiz question. Write that one down, Heidi. Inherit the Wind was a play put on, and there are several different versions of it. And there's a movie now that's been made called Inherit the Wind. The purpose of the movie is to make the Christians look stupid. And they don't use exactly the same names, but it's very obviously based on this trial, 1925. There are lots of people who've written reviews of the play showing all the inconsistencies compared to the real trial. All you need to do is watch the movie Inherit the Wind and read the book, and you'll say, well, they changed hundreds of things in there just to make the Christians look stupid. And that movie, Inherit the Wind, is playing in public schools all over America every day. And all it does is make the kids think that the atheists are smart and the Christians are dumb. And if they're showing that in your school, you ought to object, because that's very biased. Okay? Let me give you just a little bit of history of what happened. Back in America, all through its history, there was very little evolution in the textbooks. After this trial, there began to be a little bit more after 1925. By 1950, though, there still was only 2,000 or 3,000 words about evolution in the average textbook. It didn't teach it very much. These charts here are in your seminar notebook in the chart section, which I believe is, let's see, charts. Page 45 is where they start. at least in this edition. I hate to put this on tape that it's on page 45 because somebody's going to get this after we've gone. We're on our 20th edition right now and no end in sight. Okay, page 48 is where it is in your book here. Okay. In 1957, something very important happened. The space race was on. Does anybody know who got the first satellite up and what the name of it was? Sputnik, they call it, right? In Russian, Sputnik. We always call it Sputnik over here. The Soviets launched the Sputnik. It was kind of a dud as far as satellite goes. It went up, lasted a short time, and fell back down. But the fact is, they got something into orbit before we did. So the humanists and evolutionists and communists in America decided this would be great to use as propaganda to show that Americans are behind in science because we're not teaching evolution. You follow that? So there began to be news articles and letters to the editor, and see, America's losing the space race because we're not teaching enough evolution. Now, what does evolution have to do with putting a satellite up? Nothing. But they said, this shows that the Soviet science is ahead of us because Soviets have been teaching evolution for years. And we weren't teaching much. Then in 1959, another important event happened. So 1957, you need to know that for the quiz, Sputnik was launched, and people used that as an excuse to say American science was inferior. 1959 was the 100-year anniversary of Darwin's book coming out. Darwin's book was published in 1859, and in a 100-year anniversary, a bunch of atheists and evolutionists got together and had a big symposium and said, you know what, we still don't have much evolution in the textbooks. This theory's been around for 100 years. We all know it's true. This is their thinking, okay? But we're still not teaching it to the kids. So in the late 50s, there was a very concerted effort to get more evolution into the schools. And in the late 50s, as far as I can figure out, the first time in the history of America, a government grant was issued to produce textbooks. Up until that time, if you wanted to write a biology textbook, have at it. You can write any book you want, and then you try to get somebody to buy it. It was the free market system. I could write a book, somebody else could write a book, we could both send it to the school, please buy our book, and the school would decide. Or the teacher would decide, or the school board decide, or somebody would decide which book to buy. But now the government produced textbooks, or at least with government funding. It was called the BSCS series. Write that one down, you'll need that. BSCS. I'll show you some of the books here throughout the course. The BSCS series was the first book that as far as I can figure out in my study of this, that really pushed evolution to the hilt. In 1963, there were 33,000 words about evolution in the average textbook. Just from the late 50s to the early 60s, evolution took over everything as far as the philosophy goes for our school system. Jumped from 2,000 to 3,000 to 33,000 just in a few years. 1962 and 63 was a year that's very famous for a trial where prayer was taken out of our schools. Does anybody remember the atheist that pushed that through? Madeline Murray O'Hare. Write that down. Early 60s, Madeline Murray O'Hare. What happened, there's quite a story about that. You might want to get a book if you'd like studying this topic. The book is called My Life Without God. My Life Without God by William Murray. Madeline Murray O'Hare had 2 illegitimate children. She chose the last name for one of them from the father of the child, though it was not her husband. She never did marry him. He was an illegitimate child. His name was William Murray. William, they were in school in, I think, Brooklyn, if I recall. It's been a while since I read the book. Madeline Murray O'Hare had gone to the Soviet Union asking to be a Soviet citizen. She hated America. Actually, she went someplace in Europe and was writing letters begging, please let me in. I'm a communist. I want to live in a communist country. They kept writing her back saying, we don't want you. Because Your work record shows you never keep a job more than 6 months. You get mad at the boss for something and quit. You're a troublemaker. You're lazy. We don't want you. She finally got the message and came back to America, to Brooklyn, when she realized the communists wouldn't take her. Now her son, William, I think was in 9th grade, if I recall. She takes him to school about 2 weeks late. I think it was mid-September when this happened. She came back. She said, well, William, I guess I got to put you back in this, capitalist school here in America. She's taking him to the principal's office.